Greetings and bienvenue, Midnight Crew. Thank you for returning to this broadcast. And welcome to new viewers joining us for the first time. If you like a video, then feel free to subscribe.
We'd been in the woods for 15 hours. My friend Devin was screaming his lungs out. "Dude, get over here, I found it!" I twisted around to look behind me, and I could see Devin's flashlight dimly glinting in the dark. I sprinted, not listening to the throbbing pain shooting up my leg. I was surprised I didn't tear something by then. I came crashing into Devin, who would have been annoyed if he didn't sound so frightened. "Nathan, look at this shit. What the hell do you think this is?" He'd been coughing, and his hands continuously trembled, which made the flashlight beam dart around frantically. "Dude, I don't know. Personally, it looks like something the kids would do to get a scare." Devin held the flashlight closer to what looked like a stone tablet, crudely chiseled hieroglyphs covering the visible surface. As I said, we'd been out there for 15 hours at least, and I couldn't admit that I was a little frightened myself. Devin brushed some dirt off of it, and that movie Jumanji came to mind, where the kids find that board game deep underground, and the music rhythmically pulses to foreshadow the danger soon to come. I was also shaking by this point. "Okay, we need to leave." "But we can't." "All right, we can't." Devin's voice grew more stern and unbreaking. "We were stuck, damn it. Stuck. We couldn't leave, even if we wanted to, until sunrise, which would still be another 9 hours. That was the challenge. You performed the first steps of the ritual, and sure enough, night would fall quickly and last a whole 24 hours. We did it just to goof around, like how all kids play light as a feather, stiff as a board, or Bloody Mary. You didn't do this stuff because you thought it would actually happen, more for just the experience. Next time Billy Randolph kicks you around at school, you could tell him you went to Yard of Woods and lived. He could kick your ass, but you would still have more balls than most people. What had caught us off guard was that it did happen. Me and Devin just sort of sat around outside of the woods for a while, after saying the words and turning over the largest rock by the largest oak. When we got bored, we went into the woods. Then we got lost. We wandered through the thicket for hours, quickly realizing it wasn't just some mumbo-jumbo the kids around school did for a laugh. Devin hadn't brought his watch, but I had, thankfully. 2 hours later, we hadn't found our way out. That was part of it, though. The forest wouldn't let you leave until dawn. There were other stories, too, ones we didn't take comfort in thinking about. What we did focus on was the payoff. All of these legends, old and new, shared this detail in common. There was always some kind of reward. What it was, nobody was quite able to explain, or they were hushed up about it for some reason. If you were going to go to the trouble of making a mistake like we had, there had better be a reward. Me and Devin were out of breath from exhaustion and fear. I sat on the ground and lay back. Devin just sat on one of the closest rocks and leaned the tablet up against a tree. For the past hour or so, I thought I heard something moving not too far away from us. I didn't mention it because I'm sure Devin wouldn't take that too well. He probably heard it himself anyway. At that point, we had about 7 hours left until dawn, but it still felt like it would never end. I thought I heard Devin snoring a little while later. The both of us were still resting where we'd stopped. I couldn't blame the guy. I was surprised I hadn't dozed off myself. I heard another noise at that point, and although it was closer and more distinct, I couldn't tell what it had been. It clicked and rattled for a couple seconds, echoing and repeating off the endless trees around us. Devin left his flashlight on. A bad move? Probably, but at that point I would have rather been able to see a little while we rested. I got up from my spot and walked over to the tablet, where I picked it up and sat down by the tree Devin was at. It was heavy and cold like a brick of ice. I studied the symbols until I couldn't pull interest from it anymore. It certainly looked like a kid made it. The geometric symbols were so crudely etched in, it was easy to think that. Devin must have had a nightmare because I heard him scream in a sudden burst of panic that sent the tablet flying out of my hands. He knocked over the flashlight in his movement, and the only light fizzled out. I couldn't see a hand in front of my face. I tried to find Devin, but he took off deeper into the thicket and I'd lost the direction he was after. There was that clicking noise again, and I called out into the darkness. Devin, you piece of shit, what happened? The darkness didn't speak back and I ran. I didn't stop, only hesitated when I nearly bumped into trees, stumbled over roots and foliage. My leg burned worse than it ever had before. For a moment I thought I could hear him again, screaming in winded bursts. I stopped dead in my tracks when I guessed he was no more than 15 yards away. That sound again, the rattling. It wasn't a snake, in fact. It sounded more like the clatter of teeth. Devin had also stopped apparently because I heard him breathing slow, stuttered gasps. Devin, I said. Devin, stop. You're not making this easier. What happened? His breathing hesitated a moment, but instead of a clear response, he started mumbling that damn poem from before. Say the words and turn the rock. The forest here will slow the clock. Wait until the day is near. Patience will reward your fear. How old are you, 10? You can quit now, dude. Nothing moved. The forest in its entirety halted. There was no mossy wind that whistled through the trees. Insects ceased their night call. By then I was sweating from my arms and face. My fists clenched in anger. I walked with as little volume as possible to where I thought Devin was. I reached out a hand and felt the cloth of his plaid shirt glide over my fingertips. He whispered, the sound of his voice facing away from me. Get the tablet, Nathan. Go find it. I'll wait here. Devin, what's going on? That's like asking a blind man to find a sheet of paper in a warehouse. I can't do this in the dark. What's going on? I heard the clicking sound again and the wind picked up. Devin must have moved while I was talking because he was gone. I stumbled past trees, more or less tripping in defeat and fear. I felt like someone was staring me down, and I most certainly didn't want to be heard. I pressed my wrist up to my eye, but I still couldn't see the time. Click, chatter, chatter, click, click. This time it was only a few feet away. I couldn't tell you how long I leaned up against a tree in the pitch, waiting for something I wasn't sure of. The silence allowed me to hear the ticking of my watch at arm's length. I kept my eyes closed, legs threatening to collapse under their own weight. Something might have moved past me in the darkness, but I couldn't be sure. All I cared to think about was how when I opened my eyes after the countless hours had passed, I could see the inky blue revealing the tops of trees as dawn set in minute by minute. Even then, I couldn't shake the feeling of something being horribly wrong. As soon as I could see the ground in front of me, I took off as I had done before. My leg ached as if it were broken, and by then I realized just how starving I was. It was like the need to eat had been lifted for that awful night. It took no more than 30 minutes to find the way out. In fact, I found the exact same cliffside we had entered through, but before I charged for the turnpike, I looked back as if to stare the nightmare in the eye a final time. Laying there, propped up against one of the fencing trees, was the tablet, staring back like a bad omen. As quickly as it met my eyes, my hands clenched to fists. Devin had played me for a sucker. He'd taken the damned thing and set it there on his way out. I went home feeling the most betrayal I've ever felt in my life. I didn't even bother with getting in contact with him later on. I never did see Devin again, though. For years, I thought it was just guilt or fear that I would rip him a new one if we ever met again. The latter certainly wasn't true, but I at least wanted to know what had happened. Why? How he thought it had been such a bright idea. No matter how I pieced it together in my head, though, it never fit right. It never explained the long night, the chattering, the noises, even the tablet itself. I couldn't come to terms with any of it. A day or so after the fact, Devin's parents order a police search. It wasn't a surprise to me that they never did find him. But that's when I questioned my original ideas of the whole thing. I couldn't see Devon as a runaway, and I wasn't ever questioned about the event, which wasn't a shocker. The cops here are as ignorant and as disgustingly passive as they come. They were probably more concerned about their paychecks than some stupid kid who never came back after an outing his parents weren't aware of. I couldn't rid my mind of the thought, though. It wouldn't let me. A couple years ago, I went back there. I'm much older than I was back then, but life hasn't quenched my curiosity. I had always told the story after the fact to friends and family, and when I got the chance, I made it my mission to close the loose ends on everything. It was sundown when I got there, driving up the steep paths that led to the cliff's edge. This time, though, I didn't say the words. I didn't turn the big rock over either. It was strange how the place had seemed so untouched, how it differed very little from memories that were made decades ago. I walked through the forest, carrying my industrial spotlight lamp and a compass for good measure. I must have wandered around there for an hour. It all came back to me, though, when I found what I thought would never be there. The stone tablet lay on the ground next to a patch of toadstools. Since then, it had started to grow moss, but I could tell what it was sure enough. The locale had varied, but the item itself was timeless. What I saw afterward still holds tight in my mind. Not too far from a tablet, at least a half-dozen yards away, a tree had fallen over long ago. I knew this, because the corpse that lay under it had rotted away since then. All I could see was the shoulder and arm, the beckoning remains of a sun-bleached skeleton. I knew it was Devon, no question about it, because it brought back a detail I had long forgotten. He had been wearing a red plaid shirt. After that, I promised myself I would never tell this story again. It's been on my mind constantly, though, and I've considered airing it one last time as my confession to the world. It still keeps me up at night sometimes, and maybe my own baggage of the situation should be put to rest. I often find myself looking up at the ceiling some nights, repeating the event over and over in my mind. I never enjoyed the outdoors as much as I used to either. Everything is staring back, watching me at all hours, preparing to make its move. All there really is to say is that maybe those things our peers were too afraid to do weren't just nonsense. Children say a lot of things, but it wouldn't stop the young idiots like me and Devon from getting into dangerous business. Things we may never be able to explain with coherency. Maybe if I air these grievances, whatever is making the clicking sounds will go away. Please, go away.
Something weird happened to me and my brother many years ago. All right, guys, this happened quite a while ago, and for a long time, I wasn't sure about sharing this story because even now, I wasn't sure how anyone would react to it. This is the weirdest and most disturbing thing I ever remember happening to me when I was a teenager. A quick bit of background. My older brother Jerry took his own life many years ago, back in 1994. He was 20 years old, and he was one of the coolest dudes you could ever have in your family. We rarely ever fought with each other. He would protect me from bullies at our school, and in general we were just so in sync and chill with each other. We spent a lot of time hunting in the forests, camping, fishing. We played Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat together and listened to a lot of rock music. Everyone in my family, myself included, was all blown away by his sudden and unexpected death. But before his death, something weird happened to both of us, about a few weeks before he took his life. I'm not saying this necessarily caused or even led to it, but I figured I may as well share this anyway. My brother and I went out driving to Omak Lake in Washington. We're from the Okanagan Colville, in our dad's RV. We were going to spend the weekend fishing and camping together by the lake, listening to music on the radio, smoking, just chill out and have a good time. It was a beautiful, clear night, and we could see the stars. My brother liked going there because he was always a big lover of being under the stars. Always a very deep and spiritual bro. Caught some trout, some red-side shiners, and ate them over a campfire. The entire time we're chatting about all kinds of stuff. The Berlin Wall, Terence McKenna, etc. He was one of those people who got really philosophical. The entire time we just lay there under the stars, and we both fell asleep. It's pretty cliché and weird to have these bonding moments with your brother, but at that moment we were just two cool dudes who understood each other. We didn't need to hug or say, "I love you, man," because we could both communicate simultaneously with our stoned minds. I rarely got to see a lot of him, because he had this job all the way over in Spokane, and I was still in high school at the time. This was before the internet as well, so we could only write each other by mail or telephone. So it meant a lot to me when we got to catch up at moments like this. Anyway, hours later, we're both fast asleep. And that's when I had this crazy dream. It was so weird, I actually wrote about it. I was standing in this bleak, white Arctic wilderness. There's this really intense, high-pitched wind blowing. No matter where I'm walking, all around me is nothing but a dense white fog, nothing to be seen for miles. I cannot see a damn thing at all. I call out and try yelling for help, but no sound leaves my mouth. Then I notice this dark silhouette of a tall, shadowy figure creeping towards me. All I could make out was a tall, human figure, not a bit like the Slender Man shit now that I look back. No matter which direction I ran in, the eyes just stayed right there in front of me. With each passing second, the shadow got closer and closer. I realized that something was coming. I was freaking out. I had no idea what was heading towards me, but whatever it was, I could not stay still. Also, whatever it was, I could tell that it was breathing. I could hear its low grunts. I could even feel the vapor hitting my face. It was eerie given that it wasn't even that close to me in the first place. But then I guess in a dream world, the laws of physics never really apply. The tall shape was getting closer towards me, with its rhythmic breathing, when all of a sudden, I noticed that the wind had stopped, and I couldn't see white anymore. Now everything was fading to black, except for the eyes. It was so dark I couldn't even see my own body. It was so unsettling and ominous. I felt like I didn't exist anymore. Then the space around me turned into a cosmic spectrum of colors. I was surrounded by these weird star patterns and dust clouds, basically outer space. I soon realized that I was actually floating. I flailed my arms all around the place, but it did nothing. I felt like a plastic bag, floating in a gust of wind. It was such a terrifying feeling because of how powerless I felt at that moment. Then I remembered this really eerie synth music. I'm not a music major or anything, but all I can remember are the words, "I am returning home, I am returning home, I am returning home, I am returning home," etc., over and over. It didn't sound like any song I can remember. In fact, it was just plain creepy, and I got more and more unsettled the more I listened to it. Have you ever had a dream where you feel like you're trapped in a tightly enclosed space and feel like you're going to suffocate, even though there is visibly nothing around you? Well, now I was starting to experience that. I was now in a situation where I couldn't breathe. I couldn't yell or shout. I couldn't stop rolling around all over the place. I couldn't see my own body. And on top of that, I felt like I was going to die. Then there was this phenomenally loud screeching. It rocked me physically, and even though I wanted to put my hands over my ears, I just couldn't. I have had fever dreams before, and it's entirely possible that this could one, but I've rarely been able to recall them with such clarity. It was so unsettling that even now, when I think back about it and type this, it all comes back. Suddenly, I wake up and learn that the car radio is on, and there is this stupidly loud noise coming from it. I realized at that moment that I had been woken up by the noise of that goddamn radio. It did not sound like any song I remembered. It was not one of those death metal screamo songs. It didn't even sound like a human. Apart from how bloody loud it was also physically distressing to listen to. It was like listening to someone scrape their fingernails against sandpaper. That kind of uncomfortable. We bolted out of our sleeping bags and ran straight toward the car to switch that fucker off. I cannot remember what frequency or station it was playing. The weird thing is, I remember before we slept, the radio was off. Not just that, the car was off and locked too. So either someone had broken into and switched the radio on, like they'd have any reason to do that, or the radio somehow switched on by itself. After breathing a fresh sigh of relief, we quickly scouted the area to see if any passers-by heard the noise. Luckily, we're both in the clear. I ask my bro, "The fuck was that?" He doesn't respond. His pupils are still dilated. though I can tell from his reaction he was just as rattled as I was that night. Chalk it up to being a weird drug-induced fever dream. We were both sweating and hyperventilating at the time. But even now, I swear there is no explanation for how our radio switched on like that, or what that noise even was. It sounded way too loud to be static interference, and did not sound like any song we knew. And that's not even the strangest part. Later that night, we locked the car many times over, and just lay by the remains of the fire until we both fell asleep. This time, we were good. We weren't interrupted by any more nightmare broadcasts from hell. The day after, I asked him about last night, asking him about what he thought it was. He said he had no idea what I was talking about. I was amazed. I did my best to remind him. I told him the screeching, the radio turning itself on, us panicking and freaking out over whether anybody else was there, and if the cops catch us, etc. But apparently he thought I was baked and had some kind of drug-addled nightmare. He recalled the fishing, the fire, the radio, the stargazing, pretty much everything except for the radio noise we both heard. Even days after that, he swore that it never happened, and that I was making the whole thing up. This made the next day very awkward for us. I remember what happened, and I felt annoyed that he was accusing me of rambling while high. But it got stranger. I distinctly remember he became a different person ever since. He didn't talk as much. He became a lot quieter and less social. He basically isolated himself from the rest of us. He never answered the phone. He stopped writing to us, which was really unlike him. And he started doing weird things. Like when he spoke, he would rarely make eye contact. And he said weird, random things. He said bizarre, random things like, suffering is the inevitable course of human destiny. Why do we shirk from our miserable fates? Our civilization is predicated on attaining immortality and the rejection of spiritual truth. He started talking to himself, a lot, even when others were near. He said he had found peace and found his God. He quit his job for no real reason and became a hermit. He stopped being interested in women and clubbing, and his apartment became like something from The Shining. It was messy even by his standards books, junk, pieces of paper everywhere. Basically, he stopped taking care of himself. My brother took his life about 3 weeks after that incident. He wrote something like, "It's time to return home." Now, I don't want to get too much into why he did it. There were a lot of things going on in his life. He was always very emotional and passionate about lots of things, but overall, he was a great guy and my best friend. Drugs alone would never have done this to him. Also, for those of you who don't know, this is a huge problem throughout a lot of Native American communities. In fact, we are more than 2 times as likely to off ourselves than the national average, especially those of us aged 10 to 25. There are a lot of factors that affect our mental health, drug abuse, and in general there are social stigmas even now against seeking help or being perceived as mentally ill. Not to mention there were way fewer resources for us back then, and weren't a lot of places where people could go to talk about it at the time. But the thing is, even now, I still have no explanation for what I heard that night on the radio, how it got turned on, or what the hell kind of song, if indeed it was a song, I heard. I'm not posting this looking for answers or an explanation of any kind, but I just thought I'd share it here all the same.
My stories involve boulders. When I lived back home, moved in 2009, up by my house, parents have now moved twice, they were basically removing the woods and building houses. About 20 years prior, it was all woods with only a couple houses, basically considered the country just outside the city. So one of the sad things about it was that the deer population was dwindling because their habitat was dwindling. Deer would often get hit in bizarre places. You'd find them miles away from the woods in busy residential areas, like they got so confused they decided to head into the city to die. I liked taking pictures of them. I was lonely after moving from my old high school, and decided to explore what was left of the woods about 2 weeks after we moved there. So all this prairie is up on a hill, and some of the woods extends into this big gully. I wanted to explore the gully after not finding deer, and while it was a struggle getting down, I made it. There's a flat, woody area, then several small cliff faces, and then the gully goes deeper. I could never get all the way in because it was so steep and choked with foliage. I mainly explored the boulders, the bottoms of some of the cliffs, and some of the little holes. I was stupid and didn't know those were probably coyote holes, and didn't even know porcupines were native until I got a couple quills to the shoulder trying to find my cat in a storm drainage pipe. Anyways, I was exploring these areas about twice a month. Sometimes I convinced my brother to come until something happened that terrified him and he refused to go. I'll talk about that later. The boulders freaked me out. I remember in a science class my teachers talking about till big rocks moved from a massive flood forever ago. I figured they were from that. Since they seemed quite out of place, they were like little islands. You could climb some and there was stuff growing on top of a few. At the base, there would be little hollows, presumably coyote dens. Around them, the ground was soft and covered in pine needles. The first time I went, there were little bones everywhere, very clean, typical leftovers from animals. The next time, there was a whole spine of an animal, big, like a deer. My brother wanted to take it home, but then decided against it. A couple weeks earlier, he had bought a German flag from the Salvation Army to add to his World War II collection, and my mom had been pissed, so a nasty deer spine was probably out of the question. Every time after that, bones would disappear and new ones would appear. The spine was gone, but now there were small animal skulls, or even partially decomposed small animals. We'd found dead cats, which sucked because all 4 of our cats disappeared within weeks of moving there. Our parents said it was probably hawks. On the 4th or 5th time we visited, we found what looked like a man-made hollow at the base of a cliff. It was only about 3 or 4 people deep, but there was a lot of graffiti in it, little animal bones, and most unsettling, a large pentagram in the middle. It wasn't that interesting, so we hung out at the hobo house, several large rocks that looked to be moved into a sort of shelter. Then we went and took pictures of the cars. There were 3 cars in the gully. One was super old, one of those long, heavy ones, maybe 1950s era. We took the license plates. We then climbed up under another cliff. It was a challenge because the ground was constantly shifting little rocks, like the cliffs were disintegrating. We'd often go home with cuts and bruises from falling. Around the base of the cliff was discarded old stuff like typewriters, keyboards, old computers, well, old to me, you know, those boxy ones. Sometimes they look arranged. That cliff in particular also had this weird section on it, like the cliff was wearing a stone mask. A very thin person, like my brother, could fit behind it. I'd begged him to go in for a week and see if anything was back there. So I was on one side and he squeezed himself in. At first we were laughing because he said it would suck if he got stuck and they had to drill through to rescue him. Then he got quiet suddenly. Then he started screaming and it sounded like he was having a panic attack. I could hear him struggling to get out and started reaching in. And to this day, the first hand I felt didn't feel like his. It felt feminine and cold, and it let go. Then I felt his hand and pulled him out. He was crying and he had a lot of scratches. Bear in mind, the rock around that area was like slate, so super sharp and breaks easily. He said he wanted to go home. We started walking fast, and he eventually ran the mile or so back and left me behind to continue walking. When I got home, I got grounded for taking him there. He was distraught all day, but when I got him alone, he said while he was back there, it went from being narrow to feeling endless. He heard whispering that got closer and felt something pulling at the bottom of his pants. He wet the bed for months after and got night terrors, but it didn't stop me from still visiting the area on my own. I would later regret it. So after a few months, 3 weeks of it were me being grounded for traumatizing my brother, I went back at a later time. I rode my bike there, and I remember leaning it against a tree. I know I did this. I started drawing before getting bored and decided to start walking down a dirt road that ran next to the woods. There were some houses farther up, where it was still almost undeveloped. so basically original prairie houses, and they were private property wood sections around them. I'd never seen anyone enforcing against trespassing, so I figured it wouldn't hurt. I was supposed to go to a friend's birthday later that day and wanted to kill time. I was also hoping the dirt road would lead back to a developed area and could possibly be a shortcut or at least a scenic route. I don't know what happened. I remember walking down that dirt road out to the prairie and seeing a house. I remember feeling like something wasn't right. The sky didn't look a normal color. The house looked wrong, almost comically huge. I remember what felt like miles upon miles of endless rolling hills, but never reaching the house. And then all of a sudden, coming to and walking down a road about a mile from my house. My parents pulled up and started screaming at me, saying I missed the party, the police and my friends were looking for me, and where the hell had I been? They took me to the ER because I was crying and confused. I was gone for 11 hours. My bike was in the garage like I had come home and then left again. I didn't have a concussion. There weren't any drugs in my system except depression meds. Nothing. It felt like I had time warped or something. There were not miles and miles of untouched prairie up there. The last time I made it there, I found an old, busted-up barbed wire fence with a lot of hair and fur stuck to it. It was unsettling because there were tons of windflowers about, but this ugly scar in the middle of it. It was a ton of fur and hair, like a whole deer had skinned itself in it. Plus, I'm pretty sure there were chunks of human hair. Painfully big chunks. That day I had also planned to draw, but when I sat down, the ground felt unnaturally hot. It was probably 70 degrees out, but it felt 100 under my ass. I know deer could have laid there before I sat, but I'd been in the area with that spot in sight for about 15 or 20 minutes before I actually sat. Never saw any deer. I got seriously creeped out and left. The hum of cicadas probably didn't help. Even now, that sound freaks me out.
I hope that you enjoyed tonight's broadcast. If you enjoyed tonight's story, then please subscribe to the channel as more Greentext will appear daily. A new broadcast will appear when the clock strikes midnight Central Time.